I am really excited to have panelists from all stakeholders in our community here that I think can help us begin a positive discussion and the creation of a framework that can make an appreciable difference in Tuscaloosa. For most of you, you know that I've been here nearly 10 years as mayor, and on a monthly basis I sit down with Chief Anderson and we go through our crime stats. And it's a very comprehensive look of where crime is taking place, what types of crimes are happening, and I get the opportunity to talk and question Chief and his commanders about what are the tactical steps we're taking to make Tuscaloosa safer. And for 10 years, I believe that our police department has done an outstanding job. But every meeting it hits me that what we do at the Tuscaloosa Police Department is static and reactive. It doesn't do anything to solve the issues that we're seeing. We could double the amount of police we put on the streets, and we certainly would make more arrests, and we might make communities a little bit safer, but it wouldn't solve the issues. I've got a cold, so I'll use that analogy. It's like me having cough drops. It helps a little bit with my cough, but it's not really solving the issues that is creating that cough. And so when I began early January thinking about what can we do, it really hit me. We need to reach out to as many stakeholders as we can to begin a discussion and to have honest discussions about where we are as a city. I was telling a few people earlier, doing this comes with a little bit of risk because most communities don't want to talk about the problems. Like every mayor, I want to talk about all the positives in our city, but I don't want to have to focus on the things that are issues. But if we continue with that type of approach, we're never really going to make an appreciable difference in solving that problem. And that's why you're here today. All of you represent an entity that can make a difference. And there's going to be others we'll be inviting to this discussion, hopefully in the months ahead. And all of you bring an expertise that is needed in solving this issue. Because I can tell you this, and the one thing I do know going into this process, the city can't solve this by itself, and the Tuscaloosa Police Department and the Sheriff's Office and the Northport Police Department and UAPD can't solve these issues by themselves. It's going to take a collective effort of everyone in this room to make that difference. Again, on behalf of the city, I truly want to thank you for being a part of this. I know some of you have to go in and out today. You are all extremely busy people, and scheduling you was quite a task, by the way. And we all have panelists coming in and out as well. But at the end, what I'd like you, if there's one thought to keep in mind, is we're going through today and we're looking at some statistical data. Be thinking about how your organization can play a role in moving forward and how do we want to move forward. Because I have no preconceived notion of what we need to do at the end of the day. And to me, that's the most exciting thing. This is one of the most exciting days I've had being mayor. When I see so many powerful people in this room who I know can help us elevate Tuscaloosa and elevate every citizen of our community. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to our Police Chief, Steve Anderson. All of you know him well. He is one of the most committed public servants I've ever had the opportunity to work with, and he's going to begin going over a statistical review of crimes within our city. So, Chief?
Depending on where you live and your social circle and how much you pay attention to the media, that shapes your perception of the crime in the city of Tuscaloosa. Other things that shape your perception of crime in the city of Tuscaloosa are if you've actually been a victim of crime, if you know someone that's been a victim of crime, the things that you experience on a day-to-day basis. All of those things create a perception in your mind of what you think crime is like in the city of Tuscaloosa. And a lot of times perception is not necessarily reality. Depending on where you live in this community, you may think that there's no crime in the city of Tuscaloosa or that there's very little crime in the city of Tuscaloosa. Also, depending on where you live in this city, you may think that crime is out of control in the city of Tuscaloosa and that the police department and people that are sworn to do things about crime and take care of crime in this city are not doing an effective job. Well, we're going to take a look at some of the statistical data that we collect at the Tuscaloosa Police Department and talk about some of the things that we as a police department are doing, some of the things that are actually working, and then we're going to also talk about some things that we feel like are not working and things that we feel like as a community we need to come together, have this frank conversation about how to do things better, because we know that protecting our community is not just the police department's responsibility. It's a community's responsibility as a whole. We all live in this community, and so we all bear some of the responsibility necessary in making this community a safer place. So I'll start out by giving you an overview of the Tuscaloosa Police Department. We have 286 officers at the Tuscaloosa Police Department who are imperfect individuals, but they're tasked on a day-to-day basis with doing a very challenging and difficult job. And for the most part, they do an extremely great job at what they do. They're dedicated, they care about this community, and they love what they do. We have a budget last year in 2015 of $30 million. I would like to see our budget increase, and it has increased every year that I've been chief. We get 25% of every dollar that comes into the city of Tuscaloosa goes to the Tuscaloosa Police Department to help us fight crime in our city. Last year, we answered 110,000 calls for service. Those are calls that are coming into the police department where we actually send an officer out to respond to those calls. Of those calls, CID, our Criminal Investigative Unit, which is tasked with investigating burglaries, robberies, thefts, auto thefts, misdemeanor harassment cases, and misdemeanor assault cases, they were assigned 7,000 cases. Approximately 7,000 cases were worked by that unit. Our Domestic Violence Division worked approximately 5,500 cases last year. Our Youth Aid Division worked 3,500 cases, and Youth Aid Division is our juvenile division. Our Narcotics Division worked approximately 3,000 cases last year, and our Homicide Unit worked about 700 cases last year. So the Tuscaloosa Police Department and the men and women that serve you every day, they're very busy and they're very dedicated to doing the job that they do. And they have a lot of challenges that they face on a day-to-day basis. And there are very few people that are out here able to do this job. Although we have 286 officers, they're divided up into many different units, just like any large department. Our CID unit, for example, 7,000 cases assigned to approximately 18 investigators to work. So that's a huge workload for those 18 individuals. When you look at 5,500 domestic violence cases, you're talking about 5,500 cases worked by about 4 individuals. When you look at the youth aid cases, 3,500 cases worked by about 18 individuals. Narcotics Division, 3,000 cases worked by about 13 individuals. And then homicide cases, 700 cases that are worked by about 8 individuals. Now you say 700 cases by 8 individuals. Yes, that's not a lot of cases compared to what everyone else is working, but those cases that those individuals work are much more complicated and time consuming, and thankfully they don't have any more cases than that to work. So that's just kind of an overview of what we're doing at the Tuscaloosa Police Department. Now, over the last 7 years, almost 7 years, going back to 2009, this chart represents the number of burglaries that we've had in our city. As you see, in 2009, we were at 1,534 burglaries citywide. And when we talk about burglaries, we're talking about residential burglaries and commercial burglaries. So that's 1,534 burglaries in 2009. And as you see, over the years, we've steadily decreased that number. So we went from having over 4 burglaries in our city per day to now we're less than 2 burglaries, less than 3 burglaries in our cities per day. And in a minute, after we look at some other statistics, I'm going to talk to you about some things that we at the Tuscaloosa Police Department have been able to do to try to drive these numbers down and reduce these numbers in our city. Now, you may think 1,500 burglaries in 2009 down to 1,053 in 2014, that's not that significant. But to us, that's very significant. To the individuals who are being victimized by these individuals that are committing these crimes, that's very significant. If you've been a victim of a burglary, you can understand why it's so important for us to be able to get on top of this and push these numbers down. And by the way, from 2009 to 2014, that represents about a 31% decrease in the number of burglaries that we've seen in our city. So that's a pretty significant decrease. And we're not satisfied with that. We want to see the numbers go down lower, and we believe we can make those numbers go lower, but we need the community's help, and we need our other partners in the criminal justice system to be able to help us do that. And we're going to talk about not only ways that we can have their help to do that, but we're going to talk about some things that we'd like to see happen in order to get that done. UB&Es, unlawful breaking and entering of vehicles, essentially burglaries of cars. About 70% of the UB&Es that occur in the city of Tuscaloosa are of unlocked vehicles, by the way. So please start locking your vehicles, because about 70% of them are of unlocked vehicles. And in the vast majority of those vehicles, they're handguns, and that's how a lot of our handguns end up on the street. So just a PSA, lock your vehicles and help cut down on crime. But as you can see, in 2009, we had 1,002 UB&Es in the city of Tuscaloosa, and we've been able to, with the things that we're doing in the Tuscaloosa Police Department, we've been able to reduce that number to 811 as of 2014, which represents about a 19% decrease from 2009 to 2014. Our next slide is our auto thefts. 2009, we had 214 auto thefts citywide. We have a number of auto thefts, and this is another PSA for you, that occur in the winter. And the reason they occur in the winter is because people like to go out and they warm their cars up and they go back in the house, and then they're shocked when they come out and the car isn't there. So if you want to help us out, don't do that. And then we have a lot of people that leave a car running in front of convenience stores, which is mind-boggling, and then they're surprised when the car is not there when they come out. So don't leave your keys in the ignition, and don't leave your cars running if you can help it. But as you can see, from 2009 to 2014, we've had a reduction in the number of auto burglaries that we've seen in the city of Tuscaloosa, and we've seen a 22% reduction in that particular crime. Our robberies. In 2009, we were at 193 robberies throughout the city of Tuscaloosa, and as far as 2014 goes, we were at 176 robberies. That represented about a 9% decrease in our robberies. Now, this next slide you may find kind of shocking, but I'll kind of give you some background on the numbers when we look at it, but it's going to be our homicide numbers. As you can see, in 2009, we had 5 homicides throughout the city of Tuscaloosa. And then if you look at 2014, we had 10. So you say, gosh, we doubled the number of homicides that we had in the city of Tuscaloosa last year. But a lot of times you have to look a little bit deeper behind the numbers and beyond what the numbers say to kind of understand what's going on with those numbers. In 2014, when you look at the 10 homicides we had in the city of Tuscaloosa, 4 of those are related to DUI accidents. One such accident occurred on January 1st of 2014, in which 3 people lost their lives in a DUI-related accident. So you take those 4 out, and now we're down to 6 homicides. Then we had another homicide that was a home invasion, in which the homeowner was simply defending himself, and he killed someone that broke into his house in the middle of the night at about 1 o'clock in the morning. That case was actually no bill by the grand jury, but we've counted it in our numbers. So if you take those 5 cases out, we're at the same number that we were in 2009. So there's really not much change in that. One thing that I will say about our homicide numbers in our city: generally, the homicides that are committed in the city of Tuscaloosa are committed by individuals who have a problem with another individual. So those homicides are not committed where you have individuals that are just making a trip to the mall or a trip to the grocery store and they're accosted in a parking lot by a stranger. We don't have those type of homicides in our city. Normally there's some type of relationship between the individuals in which we have homicides, whether it's a relationship from the neighborhood where they have some type of issues or problems with one another, an argument, or whether it's a domestic type related incident. But there's always, in most cases, a connection between the individuals, between the suspect and the victim in that particular case. Now, some of the things that we have done at the city of Tuscaloosa and in our police department in order to reduce crime and try to make our city safer, one of the things that we implemented was what the mayor talked about, was CompStat. He and I meet once a month to discuss crime in our city and the things that are going on with crime in our city. But my staff and I, we meet on a bi-weekly basis to discuss these issues, and we look at maps, and we use those maps to see where the crime's happening and try to deploy our forces where they're most needed to address those crimes. And so we do that bi-weekly CompStat meeting, and in that CompStat meeting, it's not just about us looking at a map and telling each other this is what's going on, because anybody can look at a map and see where the crime is, but we have the commanders that get up in front of the class or in front of the other staff and talk about what's going on and how they can address it. We have implemented precincts throughout the city, something that we started in 2009, first with the East Precinct out in Alberta. Now we have a precinct in West Tuscaloosa, we have a precinct downtown, and those precincts were put in the communities to try to make the communities safer and give us a more visible footprint in those communities and establish a more positive relationship with the citizens that live in those communities as a way of helping deter crime and make this area safer. and it's working, and it works much better than what we were doing at first. It gives the officers that work in those precincts a sense of ownership of the community that they're living in. Now, is it a perfect system? Does it solve all the issues that are going on in those areas? No, but our system is imperfect, but it's the system that we have, and it's the system that we have to work within. And on a day-to-day basis, we try to work together to make the system better and make sure that we try to get it right. We do something called crime reports. And for those of you that are not familiar with crime reports, I urge you to just Google crime reports, and then once you Google it, a map or a website will come up. You click on that website, you type in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and it will show you, you'll have limited access to the information on the site, but it will show you what's going on in your community over the last 30 days, and you can drill down to the last 14 days, 7 days, or 3 days if that's what you desire to look at. And it's shocking when you look at that map to see where the crime is going on in the community and the issues that we're facing. We have intelligence meetings on a weekly basis where all of the agencies within Tuscaloosa County come together, and we address and talk about the things that are going on in the Sheriff's Department's jurisdiction, the University of Alabama's jurisdiction, Northport's jurisdiction. We all come together and exchange information and ideas, because whether we want to admit it or not, we're all dealing with the same individuals, that 1 or 2% of people in our community that is absorbing a lot of our resources, that's creating a lot of the problems, and taking away from other things that we could be doing. But because those individuals are out there, we have to dedicate a lot of resources and a lot of time and effort into dealing with those individuals to try to make our community safer. We have federal partnerships that we do. We have a federal partnership with the FBI, with the ATF, and the U.S. Marshal Service. Now, I will say, out of those three, we get more bang for our buck with the U.S. Marshals and the ATF. The individual officers that we have at our department that are assigned to those different units, they're worth their weight in gold. Whenever we have somebody that we're really looking for and we really want them off the street bad, we can call the U.S. Marshal Service, and they can put a lot of people in this area, and they can find those individuals and get them into custody for us. Same with the ATF. They're great as far as when we have gun cases that we want to send federal, and getting them to work with us to get those individuals off the street that commit gun crimes. We employ a lot of different technologies in the city, such as bait houses, bait vehicles, and remote alarms. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the bait houses, we've had a lot of rental property, and we have a lot of rental property in the city of Tuscaloosa. And we know that during spring break, Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, that we see a huge increase in the number of burglaries in those rental properties because the students go away for those times. And we've had landlords and property owners that have given us homes to put alarms in and cameras in, and then we wait for the bad guys to come and break into those homes, and then we're able to catch them doing that, and we've been successful using those. And same thing with bait vehicles. We set vehicles up and put them in locations where we're experiencing high crimes of UB&Es, and we wait on people to break into those cars, and those alarms go off and the officers flood the area, and we've had great success in catching those individuals. We employ surveillance technology, both video and audio. We do directed patrols. We do targeted patrols. We do education. We do training. We try to make the citizens aware of what's going on in the community. We also do lots of community and neighborhood meetings to let individuals know what's going on in the community, to share ideas with people, and to get input and feedback from them on the things that are going on. One of the things that we do quite often, and our friends from the media are here right now, but we put a lot of information out to the media because we know that they can reach a lot more people than we can reach, and so we rely heavily on the media, both traditional media and social media, to help us solve crimes. And lastly, one of the things that have probably been the best thing that we've been able to use as far as getting people off the street that need to be off the street is individuals who are out on some type of bond or out on some type of probation or parole, is working with the district attorney's office and working with our court systems and getting those individuals revoked on their probation, parole, on whatever bonds that they're out on, in order to keep them off the street. Because we know that when we have individuals in the community that are committing burglaries, every day that they're out in the community is a day that they're probably committing a crime. And so every day that we can get them off the street and have them behind bars is a good day for us. It's a day we don't have to worry about what that individual's doing. So those are just some of the measures that we use to reduce crime. Now, what I want to talk about now is about the role of the community in helping us with crime. Family to me is the most important institution out there when it comes to community. It's the basis, the building block for everything that happens within a community. But we have a huge breakdown in our family structure right now. We have a lot of single females who are head of households, who have multiple children, and they're overwhelmed and they don't know what to do. And they're struggling, and as a result of their struggles, the community is struggling. And so we have to figure out a way as a community to be able to help and provide assistance to these individuals so that they are not left out there to fend for themselves, and they're not left out there to live in poverty, to be in a situation where they don't have any resources, anybody that they can turn to for assistance. So in order for us to start making our city better, we have to fix what's going on with the families in our community. And we have a lot of families in our community that are struggling, and the police department can't do it, the courts can't do it, corrections can't do it, but it's going to take all of us to be able to do that. And so that's why this is so important, because first we need to fix the families. And in order to fix the families, we have to engage in conversations like this, in tough conversations that nobody wants to have. The next group of individuals or next institution that I feel that's most important in any community is our church community, our religious community. But unfortunately, in too many of our communities, we see churches that are in some of our worst neighborhoods, and neighborhoods that have the most poverty and the most blight. But what's going on with those churches? They're not doing anything outside of the walls of those churches. And we need to engage those churches to get out, go into those communities, adopt those communities that surround your church, and work with those families that are struggling, that are right outside the walls of your church. Because we know that if we can get the churches involved, and the churches can get the families involved and keep the family unit intact and offer services and referrals to those families, that we can change lives. And so that's extremely important. So the church is an extremely important institution that is lacking in a lot of these communities. And I say lacking is not that they're not there, they're there, but they're absent because they're not doing anything outside of the walls of their church. A lot of their church members, they drive in for Sunday service, Wednesday night Bible study, and then they drive out back to where they came from, and they just pass through the community, and that's a problem. So as churches, we need to start engaging those communities that are surrounding our church so that we can make our family unit stronger. Lastly is our school system. Our school system is struggling because our families are struggling. Our school system is great. They do a great job, but they can only work with what they have. If we have kids that are coming to school that are unprepared and that are not able to learn and not ready to learn when they get to school because of issues that are going on at home, they're not going to do a good job at school. So the education is a huge component and a huge institution in correcting this problem, because we all know how far things have come technology-wise since we were all in school. And we understand that in order for our kids to be successful and for our communities to continue to be successful and to continue to recruit industry and bring industry into our communities, our education system is crucial. But we can't just put it all on the educational institution to do it. We have to work with these families. And it starts, like I said, with the family unit, with the churches, with the education system. And by using all of those partners within our community, we can make our community stronger, because all of those institutions make up our community. So it's not just a problem for law enforcement. It's not just a problem for government. It's a problem for the entire community, and we need to work on that as a community. We need to come together and do a better job than what we're doing. And so that's what this meeting is all about. It's not to bash individuals. It's not to criticize individuals. It's to shed a light on the problems that we're having in our community and ask for help. And that's what we're asking for. I'm asking for help. We have a crime problem in the city of Tuscaloosa. It's a very concerning and concerning problem for me, and I want some help in dealing with that problem. And so that's why we're here today, to talk about things that we can do to help crime in our city. Well, if we continue to go down this road that we're going down, we're going to have utter chaos in our communities, and nobody wants that. If we have chaos in the community, we're not going to be able to attract industry. We're not going to be able to attract the people that we need to come in our community to keep our community vibrant and keep our community alive. Now, when we think about our criminal justice system, we think about law enforcement being the key component in the criminal justice system. We're certainly the most visible component in the criminal justice system because of what we do. We're usually the first contact that anyone that's entering the criminal justice system has with that system. And so we bear a huge and heavy responsibility, but we're not the only ones in the criminal justice system. You have the court system, which is comprised of your district attorney's office and your judges that are crucial in making this work. And then you also have your correction system. They're crucial in making this work. But what we're seeing from the Tuscaloosa Police Department, and I dare say that you're seeing all over the state of Alabama, is that our system is not working very well. We are arresting the same individuals over and over and over again, only to see them get out and they continue to commit the same crimes that they've been committing all along. And so we need to have a better partnership and better working relationship with the district attorney's office, with the courts, with the correction system to address this issue. When we think about our correction system, we think about community corrections, we think about the prisons, we think about probation and parole. Now, I'll be the first person to stand up here and tell you I'm not a big proponent of community corrections. I think that it has its place, but I think we have a lot of people in community corrections that don't need to be in community corrections. I think that we need to do a better job of screening the individuals that are being placed in community corrections. And for those of you that aren't familiar with community corrections is an alternative sentencing program where a person commits a crime and they're sentenced by the courts, and rather than being sent off to prison, they're placed in a community corrections type setting where they get to stay in the community that they live in, and they get to continue to be in the community, and all they have to do is report on whatever regular basis that they're required to report on. And in too many instances, and Captain Robertson will be able to touch on this later, but in too many instances, we're seeing individuals that are placed in community corrections that are continuing to victimize the community after they've been placed in that program. And that's disheartening to law enforcement because we spend so much resources and so much time and effort in getting those individuals off the street only to see them placed in community corrections. And community corrections has its place. It's basically designed to help with the overcrowding in our prison system. If you look at the prison system, and I got this information from Billy Sharp, who's a former sheriff, and he spent some time in Montgomery in the prison system recently. He told me that our prison systems were at about 200% capacity, meaning that they are drastically overcrowded. And he told me that if we don't do something in our state, very soon the federal government's going to come in and they're going to take over the prison system. And once they come in and take over the prison system, they're going to do something similar to what they did when they were in California and they took over that prison system. They're going to say, you got to release X number of people back into the community. A lot of the people that they're going to release don't need to be back in the community. A lot of those people need to stay in prison, but they're going to be released back into the community, and then that means your crime rate's going to go up. You're going to see more and more people being victimized by crime, and that's going to put more and more pressure not only on the police, but then that's going to put more and more pressure on our district attorney's office and our court system as we're rearresting the same offenders and sending them right back through the system. And so we have to figure out a way collectively, not only as a city, but as a state, to address the state of prisons and our correction system in the state of Alabama, because they're in bad shape. A lot of our prisons are very old. They're not modernized. They're not up to standard. They're severely overcrowded, and that's a problem. And the federal government's taking a hard look at that. And so we have to come up with some prison reform that's not only going to work to alleviate the problem, but it's also not going to hurt the community when you release these individuals back into the community. I want to finish up before we go into questions and just talk about a few guys that I have in the slides here. This first individual, his name is LaKendrick Pruitt. In November of 2007, he was arrested for robbery. He got an 18-year sentence. He served 15 years of that sentence was suspended. In July of 2014, in front of a police car, he shot an individual in the streets at one of our bars in downtown Tuscaloosa. So this individual is a good example, as well as the other individuals that I'm going to show you in the slides, of individuals that are in our community. They've been arrested a number of times, and we're still dealing with these individuals. Like I said, he was arrested in 2007. given an 18-year sentence for robbery. He served 3 years. Obviously, there was no rehabilitation. I don't believe there's any rehabilitation that's really going on. I think people are going to prison and they're sitting and they're just biding their time till they get out. This guy has no regard for law enforcement or life in general, that he would shoot somebody in front of a police car with an officer sitting in that car. And fortunately, the individual that he shot did not die, and he was taken into custody. This next individual, Lamar Mims, we arrested him in 2008. He was arrested for 15 counts of burglary second degree. He got a 21-year prison sentence. Just last month, we sent investigators down. He was up for parole. We sent investigators down to Montgomery to his parole hearing to ask the parole board to deny his parole. Thankfully, they decided that it was in the best interest of the people in Tuscaloosa and public safety in general to keep this guy in prison where he belongs. I know people say, well, he's a nonviolent offender and he hadn't shot anybody, he hadn't hurt anybody, but sometimes your nonviolent offenders are the individuals that create the most havoc in your community. Like I said, we charged him with 15 counts of burglary second degree. He probably did 5 or 6 times that many crimes, and we just didn't catch him or weren't able to prove that he did those crimes. Keandre Sterling, March of 2008, he committed a homicide in Creekwood Village. He did 18 months in the county jail. He was given 5 years of probation. Then in July of 2014, while having an argument with a 17-year-old on a playground in Hay Court, he pulled out a gun and started shooting at a 17-year-old and shot a 9-year-old. So now he's been rearrested and charged with attempted murder, and he's back in the county jail awaiting a new trial, and hopefully will go off to prison. But these are the type of people that we do not need in the community. People that are given prison sentences. This guy was convicted of murder, and he didn't serve but about 18 months in the county jail, and then he was given probation and he was released, and then he shot a 9-year-old on a playground, a place that should be safe for a 9-year-old to be. The 9-year-old wasn't at a crack house. The 9-year-old wasn't somewhere he shouldn't have been. He was on a playground trying to have a good time, and this individual who's already committed one murder is out in the community. He's still carrying a gun, and he shoots at somebody and shoots a 9-year-old. This last individual right here, Henry McGee, we dealt with him in October of 2012. Officers responded to one of our apartment complexes in the city. He and another gentleman were keeping up a bunch of noise outside of an apartment. The officers got out with him, asked him to go inside his apartment. He said he would. As the officer was leaving, the officer noticed he didn't move. So the officer pulled back up to get out with the guy and called him over. And as the guy was walking to him, he decided to run from the officer. The officer gave chase. This guy pulled out a gun, turned around, and fired a shot at the officer. He got away. We got a dog out, tracked him, and ended up arresting him. He was charged with attempted murder in October 2012. He served about 2 years in prison, and then April of this year, he beat a man to death over in Mackenzie Court Apartments. Shouldn't have been out on the streets. Should have still been in prison. But this is what I'm talking about. We have to start taking a hard look at what's going on with the way our people in our communities are being sentenced. Also taking a hard look at making sure that they do the time that they should be doing. Because all 4 of these individuals, they don't need to be on our streets. And there are countless other individuals in our community that we could put up here and talk about that have been through the system and have been arrested by the Tuscaloosa Police and the Sheriff's Department and other law enforcement agencies a number of times, and they're still out in the community, and they're still creating problems, they're still dealing drugs, they're still shooting at people, they're still causing problems for law enforcement and making our community unsafe. And so that's what we want to do, is we want to have a productive discussion on how we as a community, both the institutions of the family, the church and the educational system, but also the criminal justice system, how we can come together to do something about individuals like Mr. Mims and Mr. Sterling and Mr. Pruitt. How can we do something about these individuals and individuals like them that shouldn't be walking among us and that they should be in prison serving time for the crimes that they're doing? At this particular time, the area of the city that we're most concerned with would be in Council District 7 right now. That is an area of the city that has a high concentration of affordable housing now. as we see the university is being built and we see all the new housing that's coming on board, a lot of the housing around the Skyland Boulevard area, the McFarland Boulevard corridor that used to be student-oriented, now you don't have students in that housing anymore, those apartments. And so we're seeing people going to Section 8 to try to get those bedrooms filled, and that's creating a problem in those neighborhoods. So the things that we're seeing now in the areas of Skyland Boulevard and McFarland are the things that we were seeing back before McKenzie Court was rebuilt, back before Rosedale was rebuilt, the issues that we were seeing with violence and crime in those areas. So District 7 has a problem, and that's an area where we're expending a lot of resources to deal with the problems that they're having in that area.
Of the violent crimes, what percentage do you think have something to do with the bars and the nightclubs that we're seeing? Because when I'm reading some of the reports, I notice a lot of our shootings are after the bars and the clubs are closing at night, like when a lot of our confrontations are happening. I would kind of like to know what percentage you think of the violent crimes are coming from that.
Well, I can't give you a percentage because I don't know, but I do know a lot of the issues that we are having, especially a lot of the shootings that we have on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. A lot of them are tied into some kind of confrontation that it happens within a nightclub or a bar, and it bleeds out into the community afterwards, whether it happens immediately on the scene at that particular bar or nightclub, or whether they wait till they get back to their community. We're seeing a lot of those issues, and a lot of it goes back to you have individuals they're drinking, and so they're intoxicated in a lot of cases. That clouds their judgment. They feel like they've been disrespected, and they have guns, and so they feel like the only way that they can gain that respect that they need is by using that handgun. So that's a huge issue for us, and we see most of our shootings occurring on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights.
I think, and others of us, Judge England, I believe, and I know District Attorney Head, thinks that a reentry program in Tuscaloosa would be very important in terms of having more intensive supervision over somebody who's getting out of prison. And I think two things could happen, and I think both are good. We help that person, and we get them in a situation where they don't have to reoffend. They don't have to be a part of that 70% that go back to prison in 3 years. That'd be a good thing. Second good thing is if they mess up, we catch them a whole lot quicker. We find out what their violation is much quicker in the program rather than being on the street with a gun, and then we can send them to prison more substantially. A reentry program like that, Chief, do you think that it would be beneficial to Tuscaloosa? I
would be in favor, Judge, of a reentry program only if we did GPS monitoring on every individual that was put in that program. I wish that as a condition of probation, a condition of parole, a condition of bonds on some cases that we end up dealing with in the city of Tuscaloosa, that as a condition of those individuals being released, that we could do some type of GPS monitoring on those individuals, because if we can track those individuals and keep up with them, I think that we have a better opportunity. If they know they're being tracked, one, it may make them think twice about committing the crimes that they're going to commit. But then two, if they are committing crimes, we can see where they're committing those crimes. And people always say to me when I bring that up, well, who's going to pay for that? And I say, if you want to be free, you need to be able to pay for it. And then they say, well, they'll get out and they'll commit crimes for it. But, you know, people get the things that they want to get. They get the expensive phones, the expensive Jordans and all that stuff. They come up with ways to get those things. And so if you want to be released on probation, you want to be released on parole, you want to be placed in a community corrections program, I think that every individual should be required to have some type of GPS monitoring, because that would help law enforcement out tremendously. You know, people are saying, and they go around, and our Chief Swindler said something that was very interesting when he spoke at the memorial for the officers back last month. He said, everybody wants to put a camera on a police officer so they can see what the police officers are doing, but how about us put a camera on every criminal, and that way maybe that make them think twice about committing crime. And I never thought about it like that, but that would be a good idea, but I know we can't do that. But if we could do GPS monitoring on these individuals, I think that would cut down on a lot of the problem.
As an aside, there was a young man I put an ankle bracelet on, and I guess he did not realize what that ankle bracelet actually was, because he then went out and committed 15 breaking and entering motor vehicles. And y'all were able to track exactly where he went, and that made the case much easier from your standpoint, for sure.
I'm Stephen Rumsey. I'm Vice Chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Do you think that the fact that some of these criminals are not fearful that they will go to prison because they're being released early, is that affecting their behavior? I mean, are they not scared of the system?
Yes, that makes them bold because they're not afraid of the system. They're not, I grew up where we were disciplined. And when I say discipline, we got beatings. We got whipped as kids growing up. And I'm not ashamed to say that because I think it made me a better person. But when you have punishment that is meaningful, then I think that creates a deterrent to a lot of crime. And I think when they see these individuals that are committing these crimes, they know, they keep track of their friends and what kind of sentences they get and how much time they do. And you have a lot of them that look at crime as just part of being arrested, is just an occupational hazard of the crime that they're committing. So they're willing to take that risk that they're going to get arrested and deal with whatever consequences that they're dealing with. And I don't want to steal any of Captain Robertson's thunder, but they're having a huge problem right now when they make a drug arrest. The way the narcotics division works is they try to use confidential informants to get to other people that are higher up in the food chain. They're having a very hard problem right now of getting confidential informants because these guys know that they're not going to go to prison. So what's the point of them rolling on somebody else, because they figure I'll get community corrections or I'll get probation or something like that. So why would I cooperate with narcotics and give them information when I'm going to stay out on the street? We dealt with the individual. I went on a buy bus with narcotics the other day on an individual that has been arrested for several times. How many?
It was 19 times.
19 times for various misdemeanor and felony drug cases, and he was doing a drug sale in one of the parking lots of a business here in Tuscaloosa, and we pulled up as he was doing the drug sale and took him into custody. And now, why is that individual still out on the street? 19 arrests for drug cases, and he's still out.
And he chose not to cooperate also.
And we figured he wouldn't cooperate because he figures that nothing's going to happen to him.
What is the typical time from, if you make a case and you make an arrest, what is the time frame between that arrest and trial? And during that period, do most of these criminals stay in jail? Do they make bond, or are they out on the street, or what's the...
No, they're entitled to bond on anything except for a capital case, or in cases where they are reoffending and we go before the district attorneys and the judge to get a bond revocation. But if they're a first-time offender, they're entitled to a bond. It's only very rare cases where they don't get a bond. But usually on a felony case, from the time of arrest to it works its way throughout the court system, could be anywhere from 2 to 3 years. And so in the meantime, these individuals have the opportunity to continue to be in the community, continue to commit crime. And we come across a lot of those individuals that are awaiting trial and they're out on bond for a case, and we rearrest them for a new offense, and then we try to get them violated on their bond and get them placed back in the county jail, which places a tremendous burden on the sheriff's department, because now they're having to house people longer than they want to house them. I mean, the sheriff's department is not meant to hold people for years at a time. And we have, if I'm not mistaken, at one time we had people that were waiting trial for murder that had been at the county jail for 3 or 4 years. And so that places a huge burden on them because they're not designed to house people like that.
So if someone is out on bond and they're waiting trial over a 2 to 3 year period, and they could commit another crime, I guess this might be for Judge Allman. The backlog of cases, is there an answer to that, or is there anything being done to create a more speedy?
Well, we need more judges. I think and you can answer that question, Judge.
Yeah, there are lots of wow. How much time we got? Let me say this: the county jail, and the lieutenant will correct me if I'm wrong, is designed to hold about 575 people. Yesterday I checked, it had 581, and historically that is extraordinarily low. That's a low number of people in the county jail. We've been up around 700 and in the high 6s for a long time. I think one of the things that's helped that, and I'll let the DA speak to this, is Ms. Head has started really pushing pre-indictment pleas and handling cases in district court where the case never gets to circuit court. And we've disposed, and you may have numbers, we've disposed of lots and lots of cases, and that helps. Another judge, where there have been case management studies that say Tuscaloosa needs 2 more circuit judges that have the same jurisdiction that Judge England and I do. And finally, earlier in this legislative session, the Supreme Court recommended to the legislature that, yeah, Tuscaloosa needs a circuit judge. Mobile needs one worse, so you're not getting one yet. So we're closer now to another circuit judge than we've ever been. So.
And may I ask a question, Judge? And I don't, for you or Judge England, we have 4 circuit judges, and we've had that same number since 1976 or something.
Right. Do you know the difference in the size of the police department from 1976 till today?
No, I do not. I do know when I got hired in 1994, there were about 190 officers, and so we've grown about 100 officers since I got hired almost 21 years ago. But you all have been operating with 4 judges for 35 years, and nothing, or 39 years rather, and nothing's changing on that. And in the meantime, the cases have gone through the roof. I don't know how many cases are going through grand jury during a grand jury session, but there are a lot of cases that are being made in this county, and this county has grown a lot since 1976. But
also diversion programs, such as a veterans court or a mental health court that gets the case off an active trial docket.
Well, a clean program.
Or the clean program that the DA has. That gets the case on a different type of docket where that person's he's already pled guilty, basically. So.
And community corrections, which I understand you have problems with.
And I sit on the Community Corrections Board, but I'm not I have an issue. I think that we need to do a better job of screening individuals that are placed in community corrections.
Chief, John McConnell, Planning and Development Services Director. Glad to be a part of this. You know, in my world, when I approach a problem in problem solving, I always go and search for the root causes. I know we've already discussed how much cost and how much need for back-end services that we need, arresting criminals, keeping them in jail, the judges, all of that, but really thinking about the root causes and reducing the amount of crimes committed probably makes more sense to me in the end. The question that I have is, you showed several individuals, and these individuals may be representative of a much larger crowd that you deal with. Other than race, what are the other common traits that the criminals that you deal with have? Are there any? Age, socioeconomic background, education, are there any commonalities that you have that we can start looking at some of the root causes?
Everything you just named, race, age, the socioeconomic environment that they come from, education level, all of those things play into it. And that's why I say when we look at this situation and we look at it and try to come up with ways to deal with this, we have to look at the family unit, because that's where it all starts. It starts with the family, and so we've got to be able to address the issues that are going on with the families and provide the services that they need in the hopes of building stronger families, helping people get out of poverty, making sure people have adequate education, and doing those things in order to start building a stronger community, in order to start taking some of the pressure off the criminal justice system so that we have a safer community. And so all of those things that you mentioned are critical, and they're all things that all of these individuals and the people that we deal with on a day-to-day basis have in common.
And I'll make one more comment. One other thing that I noticed in your presentation was that we had a decrease in crime since 2009. Of course, that was the height of the recession, and it looks like there's a direct correlation to me from the improving economy and the reduction of crime. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That could be a possibility. It could be great police work. It could be people. It could be people. It could be people just deciding to behave. It could be all of that. I can't put my finger on one specific thing that's doing it. I can only tell you that what we're doing to try to help the situation and try to improve it. And one of the things that we're constantly having to adapt and change, as the mayor said, we're very reactive. Law enforcement is very reactive. And so we try to do things from time to time to be proactive, to get on top of things and get ahead of things. And that's one of the reasons that we do the comp stat. And that's one of the things that we look at all these statistics to try to get ahead of some of the stuff that's going on and predict where it may happen at, predict some of those things and stop them. But it could be a number of things that could contribute to the decrease. But I like to think it's some of the things that we're doing mostly. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Linda Parsons, representing Tuscaloosa Neighbors Together. You talked about some of the prevention. You said, cars are stolen because they're running with the keys in them and available. And break-ins of cars occur because the cars are unlocked and there are valuables left inside. Do you have any recommendations for homeowners or renters to help with the prevention of burglaries and break-ins?
Yes, one thing that we see quite often, we see people that have alarms on their homes and they leave home and they don't set their alarms, and then they're upset when the home gets broken into. There are a lot of different things that you can do to make your home more secure. One of the issues and one of the things that we try to do from an educational standpoint is we have a crime prevention unit, and if you call the police department and you ask to speak to someone in that crime prevention unit, they can come out, they can actually do a home assessment for you where they take a look at your home and make recommendations on lighting, shrubbery, door locks, things of that nature, things to make your home more secure. And they can give you those recommendations. So there are a lot of things that we have to offer. We come to neighborhood meetings and we'll discuss those. So anytime you'd like for us to come to a neighborhood meeting or know of a neighborhood that wants somebody from the police department to come out and talk about safety, we're more than willing to do that. We spend a lot of time doing educational and awareness type programs in the community.
Do you have recommendations? We live in an area where there are a lot of students, and as you say, they are gone for periods of time. Are there things that they can do to make themselves less vulnerable?
It's very tough with the students because, of course, students have nice things. Mom and daddy provide nice things to students. And so it's very tough when you talk about students because they leave for periods of time. So probably the best thing that neighbors can do that have students is get to know those students and engage those students and find out when they're going to be home, when they're not going to be home, and be willing to watch out for their homes for them. Be willing to walk around the house once or twice during the time period that they're gone, just to be able to catch something that may happen, just notice something that's out of place before the student comes back and realizes that their home has been broken into. We live in a society now where we don't take the time to get to know our neighbors. Everybody's so busy, and so we don't know when a car is out of place at our neighbor's house or when someone's out of place at the neighbor's house because we don't talk to the neighbors. And the neighbors we don't feel comfortable going across the street and talking to our neighbor and telling them that I'm going to be out of town for 3 or 4 days. And if you would you watch my house? Would you collect my mail and my newspapers off of my doorstep so they don't pile up, letting criminals know that I'm not there? But we don't feel comfortable with our neighbors in doing that. But guess what? We'll put it on Facebook and Twitter that we're going to be on a cruise for 7 days, and then everybody else is seeing it, but we won't talk to our own neighbors about that. So we need to get to know each other and get back to a sense of community because we've gotten away from that.
Well, my name is Jerry Card. I'm the president of the NAACP for Tuscaloosa. And first of all, I want to make it clear that I think the police department is doing an excellent job. But I've listened to some of the comments that Judge England made, and it made me think about a situation that I had to deal with personally in my neighborhood where from this certain house, which is a problem home, there was probably as many as 20 shots fired one night. I mean, just over and over and over and over and over again, gunshots. And I called the police, and I actually stood out and watched, and 2 units came out, and they circled around, and they stopped, talked to each other, and circled around, but they left. And, I've spoken to Chief Anderson about it, and he did explain that, the officers, more or less, they investigated, but I guess the problem that they're finding is if they don't see anyone doing anything, and you've got all these people out there, I mean, I'm not sure what they can do. So I guess my comment is a question or whatever. what needs to be done? Do we need to have more police officers? Because I think one of the problems that, say, in my neighborhood, my community, maybe where Councilwoman McKinstry's district is, maybe some of these people they just simply know that if you're not standing there watching them and see them commit these crimes, then more than likely nothing's going to happen. So I mean, this is far before they get in front of the judges and they're looking at going to prisons and all these type of things. I'm talking about just standing out, pulling out a pistol and just shooting, having a good time. I mean, nothing happens.
Well, what I would say to that is, in order to deal with, by the way, yes, I would love to have more police officers. We have 286. I'd love to have 300 by the end of this year. I don't know if that's going to happen, Mayor and Council, but it'd be nice to have 300. But it's not just about law enforcement and the patrol officer that's working the streets or the investigator that's working the crime. It takes the community. If you look at the community, you have too many people that have just either gotten frustrated with law enforcement and say, we're not going to do anything, so we're not going to call them, and they're just reluctant to get involved. But we need people, the law enforcement needs the community in order to do our job. And so we need people in the community who are willing, like yourself, to stand up and say, hey, I'm tired of it. I'm not going to tolerate it on my street. You might do it on somebody else's street, but you're not going to do it on my street, because I'm going to call the police. And if need be, I'm going to tell the police what I saw and who did it so that they can go after that person. And too often in communities, we just don't get that cooperation because nobody wants to be labeled a snitch.
People who are coming out of prison, and this new prison reform bill that just passed, more people are A, not going to go to prison who have committed felonies, and B, they're going to get out sooner. The answer in the last draft that I saw of this bill was that they're going to come out and be supervised by probation. Supervision is not what these people need. They need intensive life management. They need to start over again with their whole lives. There are programs that are helping with this in several states across the nation. One of them is Florida. I've visited it. That's the kind of program Judge Alderman was talking about. We're not going to get our state to pay for this. I was so excited when the mayor talked to me about this, because I am hopeful that we get enough support, funding, interest, resources in our community to be the pilot program for the state. Because there is a program that will reduce our crime rate. Their recidivism rate for this program is less than 10%. Our recidivism rate for felonies, I can only tell you this way. I see every felony warrant that gets filed in the court system, and have been doing it since, for probably 4 or 5 years. Of the warrants that we have, from 60 to 70% are crimes committed by people who are already in our system. Crimes committed by people who have already previously committed crimes in Tuscaloosa County. So we need to do it on the back end too. This reentry program is not just supervision. It is reparenting. That's my own word for it. But we need to do it from the front end and the back end. The state's not going to do it for it, so we need to do it here.
So we need the community's support, we need the community's help, and we need more individuals that's willing to stand up and say, hey, enough's enough. I'm tired of the foolishness and the nonsense. I want to help the police make my community a better place, and we're going to take back the community. And that's what's needed.